is just a warning at the start of the podcast. This week's episode, we discuss some things that other listeners may find quite distressing. Hello folks, and welcome to this week's edition of That's Mental Mate with me, Brad. I'm joined today with old friend Mikayla. What surname are you going by these days? What would...
Holly.
Holly. Mikayla Holly.
Yeah.
Been friends for over 10 years.
Yeah, over 10 years at this point.
Old colleagues in the pound shop.
Yeah. Organising chocolate bars.
Organising the milkas for £3 for a pound. Couldn't get that now.
Definitely not.
I'd love that. I'd love that now. So we start every podcast just asking how you are.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. As much as a Monday can be.
Yeah.
It's the grimmest day of the week.
Yeah, that's why I've decided to bring out the podcast on a Monday to try and cheer everyone up with really depressing stories.
To make everybody feel better. What more could you want on a Monday?
Well, I suppose we can start by saying, we obviously know what the podcast is about. Do you want to maybe talk about a time when you've felt that your mental health maybe started to, you noticed that you were starting to get affected by it, or?
Yeah, of course. So I definitely noticed it through my teen years. I suffered with like depression and self-harming. But it wasn't until like 19, 20, I was assaulted. Then I was diagnosed with PTSD over that. And then definitely through my 20s, it really kind of hit home because I kind of started thinking about things a lot more. And then towards the end of my 20s, early 30s, that's whenever going into the doctors more, they also added a borderline personality disorder along with it. So just over the years, definitely late teens mostly, but then through my 20s, definitely a massive difference. The thoughts got a lot more darker, whereas in my teens it was self-harm, but then in my late 20s it was definitely more suicidal. Then had some time in Grantia for it, which was definitely difficult, but a massive help.
And you said that you think the depression started in your mid-teens. Do you think there was anything that kind of upset it or triggered it, or do you think it was kind of like teenage angst? Or
I think it was just like teenage, dealing with hormones, dealing with other teenagers. Children are mean.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't necessarily always mean to be, they don't realise how much they're doing. But I was so quiet as a teenager, and I was so intimidated by other children, that then if they said anything, I took it really to heart. And then I felt so alone, because it's just like, I don't have friends and everyone hates me. Realistically, nobody hated me. But when you're 15, you can't tell the difference.
Yeah, you think the whole world's against you.
Yeah.
No matter if you're loads of friends or not.
Yeah.
Was this around the time, because you've moved around a good bit, haven't you, with your family? Do you think because you moved around a lot, you didn't have those long friendships from, like, say, someone at 15 could have said, I've been friends with this person since nursery, and we've been, do you think maybe that could have affected it, or? Yeah,
I definitely think that comes into it, because from the ages of like 3 till 11, I had moved maybe 15 times over the space of 3 different countries. And then whenever then I was 11, that's when we moved to Derry. And I would have had friends for like a year or so, but none that really stuck around. So it wasn't until I was 18 that I made like a long-term friend. And we are still friends now, and she is still my longest friend. But I definitely think feeling like an outsider, because everyone knew each other from school, everyone knew each other since they were babies. And because Derry's so small, everyone literally did know each other from nursery. So I definitely think feeling like an outsider, it really brought into the loneliness of it.
Mm-hmm. And whenever you said you were assaulted, are you comfortable talking about that? Or
yeah, I'm comfortable talking about it. I've had a lot of like therapy and counselling over it, so I am a lot more of an advocate for talking about it.
Because I don't want to jump the gun, but it kind of sounds like similar situation to me. Like whenever I was a teenager, I kind of like was teenage angst and kind of felt more or less the same, like, oh, no one likes me, but no one spoke to you, so you just thought no one liked you, kind of thing. And then I developed PTSD from being attacked when I was 20 as well, so it's interesting that we're having this conversation now, whenever we've probably never had it before, unless
we've never really talked about it before, but definitely, because I think I was 19 when I was assaulted. At the same time, I was in a long-term relationship for about 3 years, where there was a lot of domestic abuse, and he had convinced me to drop the charges against this man. So I think then, because he was also telling me that it was my fault, that then definitely brought into it. So there was the assault, and then there was the PTSD of having the assault, but then also I had to get over the fact that it wasn't my fault, because for years I had been convinced. But then it's entirely me. But
then it also sounds like you were in a coercive relationship as well, so that's something else on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. So that definitely came into the depression as well, having someone constantly like telling me that I'm just not good enough anyway, and that's why bad things happen to me. So definitely there was a lot of outside factors, some outside factors that weren't real, like me thinking people didn't like me. And then outside factors that were very real, like someone telling me just abusive things on a daily basis.
Yeah. And how did you move forward with that, or did you find that you struggled with that in future relationships, or?
Yeah, I definitely still struggle with it to this day, especially trusting people, trusting what they say versus what they mean. When you're in a relationship, when there's a lot of underlying meanings to everything they're saying, then when people are genuine, you're second guessing it. You're like, do they mean what they're saying? Are they genuinely a nice person? Or is this going to come back at me at a later date?
Yeah. And so you said that this person knew the person that assaulted you, your former partner knew the person that assaulted you. Was that a close relationship, or?
Oh, so he didn't know the man that assaulted me. Whenever it happened, I had made a phone call to try and get help from my partner at the time, but it had gone through to a voicemail, and he heard the full thing happen. And then based on the audio, he had told me that it was my fault. And then he used to get me to listen to the audio on a regular basis, so much so to the point that I thought it was my fault.
Just brainwashing?
Yeah, brainwashing. But yeah, no, they didn't know each other, as far as I know.
I just assumed that when you said that he convinced you to drop the charges, I thought maybe it was his friend.
Yeah, no, it would have made sense. It was like, oh, it's his friend, so he's looking out for him. But I think he just took this as an opportunity just to mess with me a bit. I don't think they knew each other, as far as I knew. The man that assaulted me was like a friend's older brother, but even the friend wasn't a friend. It was like a friend's older brother. It's not someone I knew, but it's someone I knew as someone's big brother. So I'm like, oh, I should be able to trust this man, but obviously not.
And do you think maybe that was just him, your former partner, expressing his power over you? Maybe expressing's wrong word to use, but he was kind of controlling your way of thinking about it. And
yeah, I definitely think that he used it as a power move, because then it's something he held against me, because it's like, well, no one's ever going to want you because this happened to you. He's like, no one's ever going to want you because you've been with these other men. And it's like, well, then he convinced me that it was a sexual partner. He convinced me that I had cheated on him. So then he was like, well, how can I trust you? You're cheating on me. Which then meant that it took a long time for me to acknowledge that it was rape and not like infidelity. So I think that really messed with my head a bit. But I definitely think it was a power move based from my ex-partner to try and just have something extra to hold against me. I think in his head, because he had done so many wrong things, it was like, well, now the field's balanced because now she's done something wrong to you.
Yeah, so he kind of used it as a one-up and as an excuse kind of thing, and then worked it in his own favour as well.
He's someone who used to cheat a lot, so he was like, well, I can cheat because you did.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And how did you, if you don't mind me asking, how did you find your way out of that relationship, and how did you find help and resources for what you went through with him and with the assault?
So it is a relationship that I had attempted to end so many times over, and he would always then like come back around, and he would like, I'll be different this time. It was always that. But eventually I just stopped responding to him, stopped calling him, stopped answering his messages, and then he eventually gave up. Now, at the same time, I was going to counselling at Nexus, which is like a sexual assault and rape charity, and they were also helping me through ending that relationship at the same time. They didn't tell me to end the relationship, but when I went in and I was upset. They talked me through things. They tell me I was making the right decision. So yeah, I moved away for a while. I moved over to England for 3 months to make sure that I wasn't going to be around him. And then I haven't seen him, I haven't spoken to him properly since. And that would have been when I was 21. So,
still
13
really young.
years ago.
Yeah, but still really
I was
young.
still really young. Yeah, he was a lot older than me. I think whenever I was 21, he would have been like 34, 35, but had a baby face and convinced me he was 23.
Oh, so he lied about his age as well?
Oh yeah, he lied. He says he was doing it 10 years older, and I was with him for 3 years. But you're so naive when you're 19.
He's 23 each of those years on his birthday.
Well, we always broke up around the time of his birthday.
I wonder why.
Just a coincidence. No, he used to spend his birthdays with his other girlfriend.
And I think I jumped forward too much about, you were saying about when you were depressed, you self-harmed.
Yeah, through my teenage years, so I would say from the age of like 14 to 17, I would have been self-harming, just like cuts on my arms, my legs, scissors, knives, anything I could find, anything that I could hide. Wore a lot of long sleeve tops, things like that. I still have a couple of scars, but most of them are hidden now by tattoos, which worked out well.
Yeah.
Most of them were so faint at this point as well that they were very easy to cover. At the time, I definitely thought that this was a good approach to life, but it's something now, anytime I go to the doctors about my mental health, it's the first thing they ask me. They're like, are you self-harming? And in my head, I always think self-harming is cutting your wrists and cutting your legs. And it was only then, it was like, are you thinking of self-harming? And I never really thought that thinking of like killing yourself is thinking of self-harm. Because in my head, it's like, well, that's the end. Like, self-harming is something you do for a temporary thing. But yeah, it was only ever like small cuts. I think I knew enough to know not to try and do any like too much damage.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to like have the feeling of it, but I also didn't want like my mum to be finding out and getting shouted at. Yeah.
So it's strange because you hear different people having different accounts in self-harming. Do you feel like it was maybe? Well, I was going to say, do you feel like it was a cry for help? But then if you didn't want your mum to know, it's a bit strange that...
Yeah.
But can you look back now with clarity and think, I done this because just... Or do you think it's a completely different word?
I think it was a cry for help. But I didn't want to do any serious damage to myself. So I think there was a mixture. It was a cry for help. I wanted it to be seen, but I wanted it to look like it wasn't. I didn't want it to be seen. Yeah. So I was like, I would make it like, I would wear long sleeve tops, but I would wear like mesh long sleeve tops.
So
you know what I mean? So it's like, so you couldn't see it unless you really looked. But no,
did you want people to see it?
I didn't want people in general to see it, but I think I definitely wanted maybe family to notice. I didn't realise I could just talk to them. Because when you're that age and you feel alone, you definitely don't realise you can just talk to any sibling, your parents, any family members, a teacher, and they'll all help. They'll all do something for you. But yeah, I think it was definitely a cry for help. But I was also very aware of I didn't want to injure myself, which is the 15-year-old mindset of like, I want to harm myself, but I don't want it to be too sore.
And do you think you learned that through like movies, TV shows, music, or
online?
Yeah.
Like Tumblr, Tumblr blogs. There was so much about self-harm and things like that on Tumblr blogs, and MySpace. Like it was
really showing your age now, aren't you?
I know, I realise that. It's like I should have said like Facebook.
TikTok.
Well, Facebook even would still show my age too, but I was like Bebo, Bebo and MySpace. There was so much like.
But it's so crazy that was so accessible.
Yeah, DeviantArt as well. That was another.
DeviantArt, I've heard of that.
It was people
like a blog.
Posted like their edits of photos and stuff, but they would have made like really dramatic black and white photos with a quote over the top of it about how life is so awful. And I saved all of these and would make collages and put them on my school folders.
And would you consider yourself, like I know a lot of people back in them days would have considered themselves scene or emo or goth or anything like that? Would you have considered yourself any of those brackets? Or
I never really felt like I was any of them. Like you would have been up the town and you would have had people just scream at you freak, but I wasn't ever like fully scene, fully emo. I was just kind of a general teenager. I probably wore a little bit too much black eyeliner, but do you know what I mean? I didn't have like that quite like heavy side fringe and like all the clothes. I wore what my mommy bought me. I didn't have that much control over what I wore. Yeah.
And when did that self-harming stop? Was there like a clarity moment where you thought, I need to stop this, or did it kind of just fade out? Or
it just faded out, you know. It just faded out over time. Whenever I was 18, well 17, 18 when I was in sixth form, this is whenever I met my friend Neve, and I started socialising with her. I started going out, I started having more of just a life. And I think that definitely just made everything in life better. I didn't have such a pessimistic outlook on everything. And I just naturally stopped self-harming, and I think it definitely was because I was like, well, I now have these friends, and these would notice, and I wouldn't want to explain it to them. Not knowing, now looking back, at the time, they were going through the exact same thing. The two friends that I had at the time, they were both going through depression and self-harming as well, but we never told each other.
No,
we never told each other when we were at the time, but then, looking back, and then we would have talked about it when we were like in our 20s and things.
And do you think that, you said you stopped whenever you jumped into this group, do you think that it was to do with your loneliness and that kind of thing, that if you could put a pin in it and say, I think this is the cause of what I was doing, was it?
Yeah, I definitely think loneliness was a big factor. Loneliness and just feeling like a little outsider. So then once I had like a little group that I belonged to, it was only a small group, there was 3 of us, but it was enough to feel like seen and feel wanted. I also started working around the same time in Primark, and then I had all my work friends. So I'd be at school and I would have friends at school. I would go like in the evenings, I had my friends at work, and then I was going out at the weekends, and this was more socialising and interacting with my peers than I'd ever done. So I definitely think loneliness was a massive factor.
And do you think you would have been like that throughout your life if you didn't move around so much, or do you think that there still would have been that wee cloud of pessimism?
I think there still would have been that cloud. As much as moving around didn't help me like find the long-term friends, it's not something that ever came naturally to me anyway. So when I was younger and I was in primary school with these kids, like even in like the English equivalent of like P1 and P2. I didn't have friends in those classes anyway. So P1 to P4, I think, was like my first school I was in. It was a really small class. I didn't really get on with the girls in the class. They all wanted to play house, and they wanted to have all these pretend babies, and they were having the best time. They were loving life. The boys all wanted to play football. I didn't want to do any of this. So I then became isolated, but I could have gone and played with these children. Didn't stop me from coming to play with them. I just didn't want to. So I think even if I'd stayed in one school, in one house, I think I still would have had the feeling of being alone. But you never know.
I think it was the quality of friends rather than the quantity whenever you met those?
Yeah, it was definitely quality over quantity, because I'd had friends over the years, so like whenever I was in Thornhill, I had friends from like first to third year in my class, and when we changed fourth year, I had different friends for fourth and fifth year, and then in sixth year I had different friends. Now these girls were still all in my year, but we had like just always seemed to drift apart, or I seemed to drift apart from a group. And then they continued to be friends, or the group would split up into smaller groups and would mix with other groups and things like that. And then I just found it really difficult to like keep track and keep contact with them. So then I ended up feeling alone again. And then I would have the cycle then. But it was only then in sixth form where I think everyone's mindset changes a little bit, because you are older. You're getting closer to becoming an adult. So then you're making friends based on personality and actual having things in common, whereas in first year you're making friends based on who sat beside you or who gets the same bus as you and things like that.
Yeah. Did you find it easier in primary school to come out of your shell more than you did when you were older, and then kind of came full circle then whenever you became, like you said, you're becoming an adult, or did you find it the same kind of the whole way through?
No, I was an unbearably quiet child. I didn't like talking to people. I didn't like speaking if there was like more than one person in the room. And I come up from a big family. Like I have 8 siblings, and with my family, my direct family siblings, I was fine with. But see, as soon as someone was in that room that was not a sibling or my parent, I just didn't talk. I just refused.
And was it just shyness, do you think?
Oh yeah, shyness. I was so quiet, I was so shy. Like I was just scared of everybody. I just thought everybody was going to hate me. So I was like, well, I'll just not talk to them, because then they can't hate me.
Don't give them anything to hate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I give them no reason. They can't think I'm annoying if I don't do anything that's annoying. But yeah, primary school, secondary school, I find it very difficult to like not be quiet. I find it very difficult to like speak to people, put myself into social situations, talking like in class, never answered questions. I hated it. Like I hated any kind of like focus on me speaking. And then it was then through my 20s I then done like counselling it's more like a confidence building counselling.
Right.
It originally had started with counselling for my PTSD, and then migrated into we need to build up your confidence while we're here. And then from that, I then started to care less. I think you care less in your late 20s and your 30s. You don't necessarily care about what everyone thinks about you. So I then started making more friends, talking to people. But I think definitely working from 18 was a big factor, because working in retail, you make friends with everyone you work with. Yeah. You're forced to work with them, like see them every day.
You could be friends with an 18-year-old, and then the next shift you're best friends with a 50-year-old.
Oh yeah, 100%.
We'll get to that. I've one last wee thing before I forget about the self-harming. Did anyone ever find out? Like you said, you hid it in plain show. If you really wanted to see it, you could see it. Did anyone ever?
My mum found out. However, she never told me she found out.
Right.
I had heard her talking to her partner about it, and her partner had said something along the lines of, she might just be doing it for attention, for maybe if there's a boy she likes, give it a little while, see if she comes to you, see what happens.
I think that's a lot of the bad stigma about self-harming though, isn't it? Especially cutting, is it's attention, isn't it? That seems to be the general consensus with a lot of people, that they kind of think.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that whenever someone says, oh, they're just doing it for attention, in my head, I'm like, well, yes, they are doing it for attention. Like, they need the attention. It might be medical attention, but it's attention. You don't cut yourself for fun. It's not look at me, look what I'm doing, everyone talk about me. It's more look at me, I need help. Yeah, it's a way that you can like ask for help without vocalizing you need help. It's like, look at me, please help me. Not look at me, I'm so cool, I'm going to cut my arms.
Yeah, like it's the flavour of the month kind of thing.
Yeah.
Bringing back to, you said that you started counselling then in your, what did you say, you were 21, 22?
So I had done counselling when I was 19, straight after the assault. And then I done the same crowd, I done more counselling when I was 21. And then I would say when I was like 24, possibly, 25, that's when I done the counselling more specifically for PTSD, not just like overall PTSD rather than like one specific incident. Because from talking to doctors, they then had discussed that the PTSD, yes, it happened because of the rape, but being in a 3-year abusive relationship, I also had a lot of trauma from that. So the
you probably thought you didn't even know.
Yeah, because in my head, it was a perfectly healthy relationship that I left. And it was only then when you speak about it, you're like, oh, that's not normal.
And I suppose that's how, I've mentioned it before, for future relationships, you think it's normal when it's not, and that you probably think your actions are normal as well as someone else's. And they're probably looking at you going, this isn't normal to think this or do this.
Yeah. Like it's not normal to flinch every time someone touches you.
Yeah.
Especially when they've been beside you for the past half an hour.
So they took you by surprise.
No.
And how did you find the confidence building counselling compared to naturally picking up friendship groups and work groups and socialising at weekends and stuff, or do you think they both went hand in hand?
They definitely went hand in hand. I would say from socialising and going out to the weekends and things helped, but they helped with, I had some alcohol in my system. I had that like extra confidence boost that you get when you have a couple of drinks and things like that. Whereas then the counselling then brought into it, being like, you can have this confidence without alcohol. You know, you don't need it. You know, you can make friends during the day on a Tuesday. You know, you don't need to just like meet people on a Friday night. So yeah, once I was doing the counselling and I was also going to class at the same time. Like I was studying, and I think the confidence then helped me then make friends in class.
Because you knew you couldn't drink and
you can't drink at a lecture at 9 in the morning. Well, I'm sure many people have drunk at lectures at 9 in the morning, but I didn't do that approach to life. But yeah, I didn't want to have like a repeat of events from childhood being the one on my own in class.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, how can I talk to these people? Like, what do I do? And the counsellor just reminded me that like it's not your job to make people like you. Just be yourself. If they like you, they like you. If they don't, like that's not your fault.
And what age were you here?
I would have been about 24, 25.
24.
This would have been around the same time that we started. This wouldn't be long after we started working together.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, whenever you first started working in the pawn shop, I wouldn't have ever thought that you were shy or had trouble speaking or anything like that. It never would have crossed my mind. But I also was thinking, I know we were saying 21 is still very young and that kind of thing, but 24, for them to kind of turn around your way of thinking is quite late as well.
It definitely is.
Like for you to sit in class and go, how am I going to speak to these people as an adult was it very strange or?
Yeah, it was strange.
And do you find it different to someone new starting in work?
Well, now whenever I am working somewhere, and if someone new joins, like, I make such an effort to reach out and speak to them, because I'm like, I know how scary it is to be the person that doesn't know other people. But also then I've changed companies a few times, and I just go out of my way to talk to everybody, and it is absolutely terrifying. Like, so when I was saying how when we worked together, you saying how you wouldn't know about that I would be nervous, I used to like be panicking before shifts if I didn't know who was going to be working along with me. I already had a long-term friend that was working there, Glenn. I'd known for years, and he very much was like a big brother. So if I knew he was working, then that kind of like forced me to have this, like, I would put on like a fake confidence to then talk to people at work, because then I was like, right, they'll like me this way. But then naturally then I didn't need to put as much effort in. I could just talk to everybody and it was fine.
And did you find out there's the same in class, or?
Yeah, I would avoid going to class till the very last minute, because I hated that 10 minutes before class started when everyone was like
standing in the corridor
and talking, and I was like, well, if like the two people that I've spoke to before aren't there, am I just supposed to speak to different people this time? Do you know, and I was just like, right, how am I going to prepare? Who am I going to talk to? I avoided that point of time. But
surely you would think class might be a bit easier than working in retail, because although in retail you've got the common long shift or what are you on to, but in class you must have a lot of the same interests if you're studying the same thing, whereas you could be in retail with someone and be like, do you like football? No. Did you watch this on TV last night? No. Okay. But whereas class might be a bit easier because you have that same common interest.
So whereas so it was computing courses and things like that, mostly IT related. So in my head then, I was just like, I don't want to start conversations with them about computing, because what if they ask me questions and I don't know the answers? Because then I was just like, what if they're like these really, really computer smart people and I'm not smart enough to keep up with the conversation? Whereas like when you're working in retail, you can talk to them about anything. You'd be like, oh, what did you do last night? Oh, do you have kids? Oh, what were your kids doing at the weekend? You can talk to them about the most mundane thing, and you can make that conversation last for hours because you're constantly then doing work.
Yeah.
Whereas talking to someone in class, especially, it was a very male class.
Yeah.
I was the only girl in most of my classes, and I didn't ever want them to be thinking, oh, like, but she just doesn't know anything because she's a girl. Where realistically, I probably would have known the answers to the questions, but I was just that nervous about having these conversations that I was just like, I'll just not talk to them. Or I'll be like, oh, did you watch the football last night? Never watched football in my life. But I then end up going on class nights out to go watch the football with them. You know, I had zero interest in what was going on. I faced the opposite way of the screen most of the time, because that was the scene that nobody else wanted, and I was like, well, I'm not watching the screen.
Yeah.
So then that's how I made friends, because then they were all facing me.
Yeah.
But they were really all just facing the screen.
But then it's still socialising, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although you might get the odd shout and roar and stand up, but then they continue whenever they sit back down.
Yeah, there was still conversation. So that's kind of then how I became more friends with like people in my class. I just started going on their nights out as well.
Yeah.
Even though it was mostly always like weeknight watching football matches. Yeah. And I was just like, I don't understand this. And there was another boy in my class as well that also didn't really care for football. So we would just sit and have cocktails while everybody else watched football, and then half time then when we would chat some more. Yeah. Or we would organise it so we landed at half time, so we only had to watch half of the football match.
That's a good idea. That's what I usually do. Yeah. And you said your different counselling, you had focused primarily on the incident.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, they decided you have to focus PTSD as a whole. Was that CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy?
Yeah, it was CBT. I had done CBT twice. now, and when I was in my mid-20s, it was CBT of just trying to work out how my brain was processing everything. Trying to work out what was like factual and what was opinions that were going through my head. Like, it's not factual that everybody hated me. Do you know what I mean? They're like, that is just an opinion that you have decided. So that definitely was where CBT came into it.
And did you find it really helpful?
I did, overall. I don't necessarily know if it was the right therapy for me, because it was hard to kind of tell. But I do think it helped.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it definitely helped. You do have to put a lot into it. Therapy is something you can't just go to your session and then forget about all week. You really have to think about it on a daily basis. And then you're left with techniques that you'll use for life. Especially kind of like dealing with like anxiety. They help you. It's like all like grounding techniques and trying to reduce the chance of you're going to have an anxiety attack.
And that you said that the last time was in your mid-20s, did you say? So that was about the time we met?
That was my first time out on the CBT, and then again when I was 29.
Is that when did you, for those that might not know, Grange is the mental health hospital in the Waterside, did you, I'm trying to think of the appropriate word used, did you enter of your own accord? A section, is it? Or a section whenever you
have to go there? It was voluntary to a certain aspect.
Yeah.
It was voluntary. You sign a form saying you're willing to go in.
Yeah.
But, I had gone to my doctor's earlier that day, trying to get some time off work. And then it's very much, they're like, go you wait in the waiting room. We're going to make a phone call. But leave your car keys here. Do you know what I mean? It's voluntary, but it's a very guided voluntary. So the ward that I was on was the Grangewood ward, and it's for suicidal people mostly, and people that are a danger to themselves. So yes, it was voluntary. They were looking out for me. They were just like, she needs to be somewhere safe to protect her from herself. I only spent 24 hours in there.
So whenever you say you spend time there, you would always think it's like 6 weeks, and you don't and you're in a padded cell, and don't see anyone else. And so how was well, I suppose I should maybe, if you don't mind, talk about what you were going through to make to make this happen.
So I had been in work, and someone had walked past me wearing the aftershave of the man who assaulted me when I was 19, and I recognised the scent instantly. And for a week I couldn't shift, like the feeling of just extreme anxiety, just really not wanting to be alive. I went so extreme. I went from being like overall happy to wanting to end my life because I was getting flashbacks of the incident and things. So I went to the doctor just to ask for some help away from work, because the way my office was, it was an open office. Anytime I could hear footsteps walk behind me.
You were worried it was him?
I was worried it was him. Like, he wasn't in the building. He had no reason to be in the building. The building was secure. Do you know what I mean? But
sorry, I meant you were worried it was the guy that was wearing the aftershave.
The guy was wearing the aftershave, but I then was associating with him, thinking that he was going to come in the office. And just anytime there's footsteps, I was just on edge. So I said to my doctor, I was like, I just think I need some time off. I went in, just last, it's like, I think a week. I think I'd needed like a week off. And from that, they talked to me. They went through the checklist that they go through of like, it's like there's a depression checklist that doctors do, just ask about your well-being. And then I don't remember like a lot of that appointment. I think I was just had kind of disassociated a part of it. But it was based on my answers to the questionnaire is what made them think that I wasn't safe. They had asked me, they were like, so what are your plans after this appointment? And I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to go back to work and like gather my things and close things up, because I just left my laptop, sat on my desk and things like that. And they were like, don't you worry about that. Like, you do not need to worry about that. So they got my ex-partner, he was my partner at the time, to come meet me. And then he drove me then to Crenshaw. And my brother then came and picked up my car. But yeah, it was based on a conversation, just based on the questionnaire that they do. But I don't know what answers I gave that were necessarily like the triggering questions.
Yeah.
Because obviously some answers I must have given that were more severe than others.
And how did they, if you don't mind me asking, how did they decide that you were not free to go, but that you weren't harmful to yourself, or?
So I had requested to leave. I had gone to the nurse and I had just says, I need to leave here. It wasn't a good place for me, because the way the ward is, there's quite a big common space that's open. There was a lot of other patients there. I didn't feel safe around these other patients, but not in a sense of I thought they were going to harm me. I just was so anxious. There was so many people I didn't know, and I didn't like being around people I didn't know. I was stressed out about having large groups of people, and there were so many people coming in and out, and I wasn't. You're restricted of where you're allowed to go. You're restricted of the items you're allowed. You're not allowed. Like, they give you toast at the end of the evening with like a plastic spoon to like butter your toast, because you can't be trusted with anything. You're not allowed to keep your phone charger. And I just says like, I need to go home. Like, I am not doing well in here. So the nurse had arranged for like a panel of doctors, and I just had to agree to a certain amount of things. So I had a safety plan, which I still have to this day, where it's like 10 different questions, and it's like, if this is a scenario, what's your plan? So if you are having suicidal thoughts, what is your plan? So mine is to contact. I have my 3 people that I have to contact. And the reason they tell you to do more than one is because if you only have one, if they're busy, then you're like, what am I going to do? And what are the safety precautions you're going to do? All those kind of questions. So I had agreed to a safety plan. I agreed to having a carer come to my house like once a day until they said that I was doing okay.
Were you living alone at this stage?
I was living with my partner at the time.
Right.
And my prescription medications, I was only allowed a week's worth at a time, just to eliminate my chance of overdosing. And I also had to agree to go to the doctors once a week and then start a new batch of therapy.
And but the prescriptions, were you on them prior to the incident, or?
I was only on them a couple of days at that point. When I'd gone to the doctor, I think I'd gone to the doctor already once the week before about going on antidepressants, and then...
Was this before the aftershave incident?
Yeah. Oh no, sorry, this was like the same week, because I'd gone twice within the same week, and it was the second visit was whenever they'd seen my health deteriorating like really badly over the week.
And do you think that was due to the aftershave incident, just a massive trigger, or? Yeah,
I think as well, because when you start medication for your mental health, it can get worse before it gets better.
Yeah. They say it takes 4 weeks for you to really see if it's working, don't they?
Yeah, it can take 4 weeks. I think other maybe longer, but for that first week, I was getting worse and worse every day. But yeah, so I'd been on, at this point I'd only been on the medication for a week anyway, but I then had to kind of give the 3 weeks back for them to be given to me in a week's worth at a time. So at that point I'd been put on like an anti-anxiety medication to take first thing in the morning along with an antidepressant, and then there was like a top-up anti-anxiety medication I could take where I was allowed to take 3 of them a day whenever I was feeling more anxious, and then I had another anxiety medication just before I go to bed to try and reduce the nightmares. Well, it can't actually reduce the nightmares, but to calm me a bit, so when I was going to sleep I wasn't as high leveled anxiety. So,
and was the nightmares brought on by the medication, do you think? Or?
No, the nightmares were brought on by smelling his aftershave, because as soon as I smelled his aftershave I remembered so much more details about the incident that I'd forgotten about. you know, because at this
You
point
blocked
it'd
it
been 10
out,
years.
yeah.
It'd been 10 years and I'd blocked everything out. But then I started having nightmares then, not only about the incident happening, but I would have nightmares about things that were completely different, but would give me the same feelings. For example, so whenever I had been assaulted, I remember the back of my head hitting off the wood on a sofa. So I kept having dreams where I was falling back and hitting my head off things. But it would just be, it could be absolutely anything, just be strange items, and I would be walking around like constantly with rubbing the back of my head, convinced that I had hit my head again, and I was like, this doesn't happen, this was just a dream.
And how did you feel whenever you came back home? Did you feel better eventually? Did you feel better right away because you're out of that environment? Because not that we're saying anything's bad about the mental health hospital, but you basically, what you said that you didn't like about it was what you said at the start of the podcast about why you struggled. So
yeah, I think it's a really good place if it's the right place for you. They do so much help for other people, but as someone who struggles with anxiety of large groups of people, it definitely was more of a scary experience for me. Another point is I had just come from the office that I worked in, so I was in business attire going into a hospital where most people were either in like leisure wear or their pajamas. And the people that I was going in with were also equally or worse mentally ill. They were not, they were all in bad places. And multiple patients came up to me thinking I was their doctor.
That's what I was thinking whenever you brought up the business attire.
So I was in basically a suit going in, and then they then thought that I was their doctor, because they asked me, they're like, oh, are you the new doctor for the ward? And I was like, no, I'm not a doctor, I'm a patient. And I don't think they believed me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You don't think...
Might have thought it was some undercover test.
Yeah, the worst undercover
It's really
person.
if you were really paranoid.
Yeah, there was a lot of paranoia there.
Yeah.
So I think they didn't fully believe me that I was a patient. And then me having to like advocate about myself to other patients that, no, I genuinely am a patient, but you don't expect someone to be having a breakdown and to be in a suit.
Yeah.
You know, if someone is having a mental breakdown and is having like the worst week of their life, you don't expect them to walk in a suit looking perfectly fine.
But then it just shows you that it could happen to anyone as well.
Yeah, it can happen to anyone. It can happen at any point.
So go back to the question, did you feel better at home, or did it just gradually get better, or?
I had an instant sense of relief once I got home.
I can't say that word. Familiarity.
Also, the house that I was living in was my own house. From moving around so much as a child, this was my home that no one could get me to move away from, and I still live in it now, and I'm like not moving. So the sense of this is my house, and no one can come in that I don't want to let them in. Whereas when I was in the hospital, I had no control
over who came in
and who didn't, because patients who are having visitors all came into the common room as well. So not only was I dealing with the unknown of patients, but then the patients, visitors. So I had the instant relief of, okay, anyone who visits this house is because I have asked them to visit. So there was an instant relief of getting home, but then the next
hurdle.
Yeah, the next hurdle then was trying to get
better,
but I ended up taking a lot more time off work. I think I took off like 4 weeks, and then they gave me another 4 weeks, and then I think I went back for 2.5 days, and then each one of those days my manager found me in a little conference room having an anxiety attack, and he was like, you need to go back to the doctor. So then I had another 4 weeks off, so I ended up in total being off for nearly 3 months. So trying to get better was definitely helped by not having to think about work. And then whenever I did go back to work, they rearranged where I sat. They gave me a seat where there was a wall behind me. Nobody could walk up behind me. Anybody that was going to walk near me, I could see. So work did a lot of arrangements for me. They helped me. They also made sure there was like a conference room that I could go to if I needed peace, if I just needed some time out, and I could work from home as well.
Before it was socially accepted?
Before COVID, I already had that work from home gig sorted.
And the days you said that your boss found you panicking, was it just everything on top? Was it maybe seeing the boy that triggered it, or was it just kind of a mix of everything, or
it was
just too much?
It was a mix of everything. I was just very overwhelmed. My body was still getting used to the medication. I was still getting used to the medication, because as much as it takes 4 weeks or so for your body to adjust, every time it was getting to the point where my body was close to being adjusted, the dosage got put up.
Okay.
So I had started it on like 50 milligram, and then within those 2 months, I was up to 200 milligram, because they were adding another 50 on each time. So I think that I wasn't really necessarily I wasn't balanced enough at that point. So everything was overwhelming. Everything I'd done took so much out for me. I'd stopped drinking for a while as well while starting on this new medication. So I wasn't drinking, so I wasn't socialising and going out with my friends. And when I was going out, I wasn't drinking, so I didn't stay for the full night. I would call out for an hour. And then, because I wasn't going into the office, I then became lonely again.
It was just a vicious circle.
Yeah, just a vicious circle.
Back to where you started, yeah.
Yeah.
And did you find that them tablets helped, or do you think you could have got through the experience without them, or?
I don't think I could have got through it without them. No? I don't think I would be here if they didn't medicate me. Now, the tablets ended up being so strong that I basically was numb, but that's what I needed at the time. I wasn't ready to process things, so what I got at the time was numbness, which did mean I ended up I fell out with friends and things like that, because it looked like I just didn't care anymore, necessarily about myself or them. If things happened, I was just very, nonchalant about it. But it's because I was so numb.
You're just unemotional in all aspects.
Yeah, unemotional in everything, because it was stopping me from having the ultimate sadness, but it was also just stopping me from having any real feelings. So I didn't get jealous. I didn't get, I wasn't upset about things. I didn't get angry at people, but I also wasn't happy for them. I was going to people's life events and weddings and things, and I was just so dull. I wasn't myself. And then I think that came across as me not being enthusiastic about people's life events. Whereas in my head, I'm like, well, I'm going to it. I'm going to the wedding, so they know that I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
Where I think it came across that I wasn't.
And it was probably such a big deal at the time for you to go to a wedding,
yeah.
If you were feeling that way as well. You were probably thinking, if this was 2 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to come.
Yeah, whereas in my head, I was like, oh, I'm doing great. I'm going to their wedding. They're going to be happy that I went to their wedding. But at the same time, it was their wedding. I was the last of their thoughts. Do you know what I mean? I was one guest out of 200 people,
But I meant more for yourself too. You were surprising yourself as well, and you were happy that you were taking a step forward.
Yeah, I definitely was happy that I actually did these things and didn't just become just a recluse. I still tried my best. There was a lot of parties and things that I had every intention of going, and then it would get to an hour before, and I just didn't go to them. I never had I couldn't be I have an excuse. I didn't have an excuse that I could write down. It wasn't oh, sorry, I didn't come because this happened. And then I never wanted to be oh, sorry, I didn't come because I was so overwhelmed at the thought of getting a taxi to somewhere.
That's still accepted though.
It's accepted, it is.
And it should be accepted.
And that is what I do now. You know, if I can't go somewhere because I just feel like I can't go, I'll just tell the person. Because if it was all the way around and I had made plans with someone and then they messaged me being like, look, I'm just not in the mental state for it, like, I'd be understanding. I'd be like, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, we can either do something else or you can just stay home. Whereas, you know, say 5 years ago, I didn't think that that was an option. I didn't think you could just tell people, oh no, I'm having a bad mental health time, so I can't come over.
Yeah. And are you still on the tablets now, or?
No, I'm currently on no tablets for depression. I have like an anti-anxiety tablet to take before bed.
Was that for the nightmares?
Yeah, to try and reduce nightmares. I still have nightmares, but they're not as necessarily as graphic. I also am a lot more aware that I'm asleep. So whenever I am dreaming, like in my mind, say if something like is about to happen, my mind can nearly always tell that this is a dream, and it forces me to wake up. Now there's times where like it seems like inside my own head I'm screaming at myself and like, Mikayla, wake up, this is not real life. And then I wake up very confused. But yeah,
that's the one anyway.
But no, I'm no longer on any antidepressants. I was on them for a good like 8. No, that's terrible maths. 3. As a good 3 years, I was solidly on them.
And what was the decision to go off? Was it yours, the doctors, weaned off, or?
A mixture of me and the doctors. From going back to the doctor, I had just kind of explained that I don't want to be numb anymore. I want to be able to feel things. And we gradually took myself off because we didn't want to have a complete shock to the system.
Cold turkey.
Yeah, we didn't want to go cold turkey. So I stopped. It was actually about 1.5 years ago that I'd stopped taking antidepressants for the first time. The past 1.5 years, I think 3 times we've tried to put me back on them, but they don't necessarily work for me in the way that they should. They're not. It's either an option of they'll help my depression, but they make my anxiety worse, or I can deal with my anxiety, and if I sleep better, and if I'm dealing with my anxiety, then my depression's not as bad. So it's trying to decide which is the one that's more important, because the antidepressants make my anxiety worse. So then I end up being more depressed because I'm home alone, because my anxiety is too bad to go anywhere. Whereas if we deal with anxiety, I find that I can deal with depression more through activities and talking to people and things like that. Just being more open and communicating to like family and friends whenever I'm like, I'm having a bad day, I'm coming to your house. Yeah. It works.
And I think the last point you said was your borderline personality disorder. How did that manifest, or how did that be found? How did you notice, or was there a pivotal point, or was it kind of just, oh, that's why?
I had heard about it and read about it before, and it's something the doctors had mentioned, like on multiple occasions, and they'd never said to me directly, you have borderline personality disorder, but they had used other terms, and I didn't realise they were always referring to the same disorder, because it's also like, it's like mental and unstable personality disorder as well, like the different ways of describing the same thing. And they were always like, you're on the cusp of it. Like, you're on the border. It's like, just, you're on the cusp. And things like that. And then it was about 6 weeks ago. I just wasn't doing well. I had gone to the doctor and explained that I'm not doing well. And they referred me to a social worker with the primary care team. And they also, I had been in contact with the crisis team up in Alton, and they had said in my files, they were like, well, have you had your therapy yet for your borderline personality disorder? And I was like, I don't have borderline personality disorder. And they're like, oh no, it's in your file, you have it. And it's just like, alright, okay. So I didn't know I had it. So whenever they were mentioning it, I I thought they were just having a general conversation.
Yeah.
But what they meant was they were like, you have it, but we're not quite sure if you have, like, borderline personality disorder and PTSD go hand in hand. A lot of times if you have one, you have the other.
And do you mind if people aren't really aware of it? Could you just describe it? Not even if, well, maybe describe how you feel about it, and then describe medically.
Yeah, it's the mind's response to trauma is the best way to describe it. It has a lot of the similar traits that people with autism and ADHD have. It's a way you see yourself, but it's also a way your brain responds to things. So someone who has maybe like was abandoned, or like a parent's left them, it's those types of things that cause it. So people that have BPD tend to have like trust issues and depression, and they kind of all work hand in hand. They're all very similar. I don't know enough necessarily about borderline personality to talk much about it, because as much as they told me I have it, there's no medication for it. There's no necessary cure for it other than talking therapy. So you naturally can
develop it.
You naturally develop it, but you also can naturally no longer have it. There is a point where you will no longer have it. And one of the main things for that is therapy. So you're talking about your issues and you're trying to train your brain to react differently. But yeah, a lot of like the personality traits that come with it are just things like jealousy or like separation anxiety and things like that. Definitely fit in like you're about to be abandoned at all times.
See, it's strange, because if someone said to me borderline personality disorder, you would think of like me, myself and Irene kind of.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds very extreme, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But then I suppose it isn't as extreme as the likes of bipolar or...
Yeah, you would think borderline personality is as if it's not like multiple personality disorders. So I think that's why they also call it, I think it's unstable mood disorder or something. So when you hear it as being like, oh, they're just like, their mood's not stable, they're like, oh, well, that makes more sense. Borderline makes it sound
not as bad.
Whereas I'm just like, it's more just, you don't have as much control over your emotions.
So is it kind of, would it be kind of like you're more sensitive to triggers kind of thing, or?
Yeah, or even just more sensitive in general.
Yeah.
I think that it's in my head, that seems to be what it is. Mine's is more, I'm just really sensitive. So, which is fine.
No, that's very interesting, because I don't think I have anyone on this podcast with that, so that's why I just thought I would ask you about it. Obviously, it seems like it's still very early days.
Yeah,
so.
It's literally only been like the past few weeks, so I've had like a brochure about it. I've started, I've gone to this, like, it's like a group therapy session that I've done for the past few weeks. And that's just trying to tell you about how to react to situations. But again, I'm still very new into this therapy, that I haven't got the benefits of it yet, because a lot of therapy at the start is kind of going over backgrounds of things.
Well,
you kind of go backwards a lot before you go forwards.
Yeah. Well, you never know, whenever you learn a bit more about it, we could have a episode 2. And
I know, I'll come back whenever I've finished the therapy sessions over it, and I'll maybe understand what borderline personality is.
Yeah.
Because I'm still not fully sure. Because in my head, I read it and I'm like, sensitive and overly emotional is like the main 2 aspects. I'm like, oh yes, I am sensitive and overly emotional, but that's fine. That's my personality.
It's just not as common as the likes of, you would say, oh, I have depression, or I have anxiety, or even, like I said, bipolar. Like, a lot of people know what bipolar is. It's obviously a massive extreme. Yeah. Or there's probably different levels of it as well, but it's just isn't as common. So if you were talking to someone, they said, "Oh yeah, I've got," they would kind of look at you and go, "What's that mean?"
Yeah, a lot of people have confused borderline personality disorder and like having multiple personalities.
Yeah.
Like that has definitely come into it.
I think it's when we bring personality into it, it's kind of,
and then because people have asked, they're like, "Oh, so like, do you have like different people in your head? Like, are you like
split?"
Yeah, it's like, do you have different like names for each personality? I was like, oh no, I only have my one personality, and that's sensitive.
It's just the different triggers.
Yeah.
Is it kind of the triggers are different to other people's triggers, and you would kind of, I suppose you're getting at the sensitivity side of it.
It's your reaction to things. It's because, while yes, you should have a reaction to
could be an
everything,
overreaction or an underreaction.
You need to think, does the reaction equal to what the incident is?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes your reaction is, completely rational.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you're in danger, yes, get out, make yourself safe. But do you think you're in danger because of a genuine danger? Or is there just like 3 too many people in the room and you've decided you're in danger? Whereas realistically, these are all people you know and trust. That's whatever then you need to think, right, is this a normal reaction? But again, that still happens. There's times where I'm in like rooms of people and they're all people I know. And I'm still like, no, I don't like this anymore. But I'll just go outside, or I'll go to the bathroom. I think I must go to the bathroom more than any person. I'll just go wash my hands. It gives me a break.
Yeah.
It gives me like a few seconds to reassess the situation of, you're perfectly fine. The fact that you've been able to walk to the bathroom and wash your hands and no one's come after you, you're all good. So that's definitely where the therapy comes in, is trying to work out
rationalizing.
Mm-hmm. What's the facts that are in front of you? The facts are, you're in a room of people that you know and trust. So why do you not feel safe? Which is fair.
It is very interesting though, when you talk about it like that. But I suppose I think all things mental health are interesting. I think that's why I've made this podcast.
Otherwise the podcast would be really strange thing for you to do. You're like, I'm going to make a podcast about something that is so mundane that I do not care about.
And we ask everyone at the end, if you could give anyone going through a similar position to yourself any advice on what you do to make yourself feel better. It could be your medication, it could be anything really. What advice would you give to someone that is listening to this and resonates with this?
I would definitely say that, remember, you've had worse days. So you've survived every bad day that you've ever had. So if it's just a Monday and you're having a bad day at work, you've survived other Mondays that were bad days at work, and you've probably survived worse events in your life, and you've still made it to the next day. So that's the way I approach it, is I just keep reminding myself, like, I've been through so much worse in work. Not in work, in life. I've been through so much worse in a day in my life than I am having that moment, remembering it. Remembering it isn't as bad as actually going through it. So you just need to remember that you've got tomorrow, and today was just thoughts. That's really all they are.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for coming on and talking to me. It was very interesting.
You're very welcome.
I think we know each other a good bit better since that too.
I know.
Well, thank you very much. Anyone negatively affected by this week's episode, there are a number of links in the bio to help. That's all from me. I will see you next week on That's Mental Mate.